Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another video where in Blender again, just continue on from where I left off previously. One of my issues at the moment is that I'm doing this spread out across a week, so this is two different sets of footage and a voice recording all on separate days. So I need to remember exactly where I started and what we were trying to achieve. As you can see, we're still following along with the Blender Guru tutorial. Just right now trying to get the icing all sorted out. Now, I think I spent a bit of time here skipping ahead, which is, I think, maybe a bad or maybe a okay habit to have with learning in tutorials. I like to see what I can do immediately with the small amount of information that I've learned. So rather than waiting to be shown exactly how to do the icing and exactly how to make things look nice and neat, I started to fiddle around with checker deselecting certain edge loops just to see whether I could make something that looks nice. So I think I do go back to the tutorial pretty quickly at this stage. But yeah, mostly just trying to get the icing sorted out, making it look nice and tidy. I think any second now, yeah, can see that there's bits of broken geometry lying around, which is just not quite great, not quite where you want it to be. Now, I think that's coming together, not too bad at all. Then the shrink wrap is where I go back to the tutorial, and that's where I get shown how to do shrink wrapping and how to make sure that everything looks nice and neat, and then using the creasing to just make things again look nice and neat. Now, I'm actually super excited with how all of this ends up turning out. It's one of those things that is really satisfying to do in Blender, especially when you're following tutorials. But, I just can't wait to be at a point where I can picture something in my mind and then I'll be able to make it happen on the software. I can't wait. It's so exciting. I'm so excited. It's the kind of thing where as you're following along with a tutorial, you can start off really basic, really feeling as though you're not at that level and you're just not seeing a way to get there. And then by the end of the tutorial, it just hits you all at once. Even though you followed along with the tutorial, you know what I did. You just did that, right? Now here, of course, we want to add a bit more volume to the exterior or the edges of the icing because, as Blender Guru points out, obviously icing trails down, gravity has its own effect, and then I noticed that I wanted to add a little bit more roughness to the icing and make it look a little bit more chaotic because, as is well known to anybody who has an interest in art, the life isn't perfect. So the more imperfect, perfectly imperfect you can create something, the more likely it is to look realistic. Now, again, this is just me going back to all of the things that I tried to do in edit mode, but now I'm in sculpt mode and just making things look a little bit nicer, a little bit neater, and yeah, it's my goal with this now is to end up creating a nice scene. So I'm not going to stop at the end of the Blender or Blender Guru tutorial. I'm actually going to fill out a full cafe, make a bar, and make a whole thing. And I think he leaves us to create a plate at the end of his video, and I think I quite struggled to begin with, making mine look nice and neat. And then in the next video, or the next portion of the tutorial, he shows us how he makes his. Yeah, I had this idea that I wanted to have a little lip in the middle of the plate, but underneath it. I was just trying to fiddle around to get that to work, and it didn't work immediately, so I just skipped over and went back to doing something different. Now, yeah, I definitely put a fair bit of time into the plate, and I think this just goes to show that when your skill level is low, if you're not following a tutorial, you'll spend so much time fiddling around with something that's just not working. And it's far better off to go along and actually have a look at a tutorial and end up following along with it. Ultimately, in the end, I end up quite being happy with my plate and how it looks and how I've got it sorted out. I think I might end up deleting this one at some point. Again, I made this footage about a week ago, so the kind of thing where I am just trying to go off of my memory as I watch the footage, and it's right there that I spot a bit of issue with geometry, which instant easy fix, just move it up slightly. And then I duplicated the donut because I'm trying once again to think broader picture. I don't want to just follow along with the tutorial. I want to create a full scene by the end of it. So I'm just trying to fiddle around, get things to a point where I'm going to be happy with it. And yeah, everything ends up looking quite nice. I'm very happy with how the basic textures end up appearing for the fancy cup. And that right there is where I started the second set of footage from yesterday, actually. Now, this is the Blender Guru tutorial section for making the plate. So he shows us how he makes his plate. I've made the plate quite larger than a cup, like a singular donut, because I, again, want to have a full scene by the end of it that I can really just show off, and I'm something I'm working towards being really proud of. I'm actually really excited at the idea of condensing, you know, 5 to 10 hours worth of footage down into a single 10-minute video just to watch the workflow and just to really see how much work goes into creating a simple 3D scene. Definitely going to be something I'm interested in seeing, and I'm really hoping that this is just, you know, a first step, the one of many first steps towards getting to a higher quality and being able to make things consistently. I also need to fully redo my file explorer on my computer because I just have assets everywhere. Nothing is properly managed or put together. Now, I've actually had to go back, stop here for a brief moment, just to zero out how I've got everything rotated before I add this lattice deform. And once again, like the lattice, I've never even heard of this until I've come back and watched a new tutorial from Blender Guru. So it's another thing where it's almost certainly a good idea to continue to watch tutorials. You know, you're never not learning. It's always going to be a thing where you're always chasing after the new knowledge and the new experiences that other people have been able to learn when you're not around. And now I'm just trying to make it so that the beginning of the scene is nice and sensible. When I move the meshes around, I'm hitting G and G to move, and then Shift Z so that it stays on the same Z axis. If you've got the camera at an odd angle and you just hit G and you try to move it, this is something I made plenty of mistakes on when I first started out. I was constantly pressing G to move something, but then I would move it up and down as well as to the side where I wanted it to be. And it's just one of those things where yeah, you'll very quickly learn to hit that Shift Z or to change the way your camera is angled before you move things. And then again, with the eye to create a bigger scene and to try and get a little bit more life into how things are, I've created a cylinder and then used a Boolean modifier on this donut off to the side here. Because I haven't joined the two meshes yet, because we haven't done that in the Blender Guru tutorial. I don't want to skip too far ahead. I had to use a Boolean on both the icing and on the donut itself. And now I'm just adding a little bit more geometry here just to fiddle around with it so that it looks a little less flat. I've shaded smoothed, and honestly, just looking at this again, this is something I know I have to come back to at some point. This is not at realistically a nice level. I'll have to add a fair bit more geometry, smooth out the corners and the edges, and just try to add a little bit more texture to it. I'm hoping in the next step when we do the texturing model, like the texturing tutorial itself, that things will start to look nicer. Now, when I first put the bite into the donut, obviously, as you saw, a lot of issues with overall just the flatness. So the kind of thing that adding a bit more geometry, I'm hoping will just solve it overall. And I think here at the table, and then any second now, we're just going to jump straight into doing the basic texturing. So obviously I start with pink and then I try to do brown. And here I run into a slight issue where I just couldn't quite figure out how to make the pink icing be the brown material instead. What I realized is that I've added two materials to this specific icing mesh, and I had to delete one that's not actually deleting the material, it's deleting the material from the asset, and then I was able to make those changes quickly there. Now I go through and I make the plates gray. I think I definitely come back and I make them a little bit whiter overall because I end up not really vibing the color and the vibing the feel of it. And then because I'm going for a little bit more of a handmade vibe with the mug, I just made it basic brown, and I might come back and remove or make the roughness a little bit higher so it loses its glossy sheen. In fact, I'm looking at this now. I need to come back and reduce the roughness for the fancy cup that's teal because I want that to be very shiny because the idea is it's meant to be a fancier cup, right? Now, as you can see in the back there with the donut, the bite's not great. You can see that it's not really smooth and it doesn't look as amazing as I would want it to. But overall, I'm quite happy with how the scene turned out and so far. And when I say scene, I don't mean the end scene. Like I said, I fully plan on turning this into a huge cafe vibe, and I can't wait. I'm so excited to see how everything turns out. And thank you again for watching. So if this is the kind of thing that, you know, you're interested in, definitely feel free to leave any comments or questions. I really want to continue with this, and I can't wait to get to a point where I'm just all over it.